This week, President Biden will make his first official trip as commander-in-chief to Wisconsin and Michigan to discuss COVID relief and vaccine distribution. But the shadow of the deadly January 6th assault on the Capitol still looms large. Now Congress is looking to form a special commission to investigate the attacks. So Ed O'Keefe is at the White House. Ed, even after, the acquittal over the impeachment, we're still left with a lot of unanswered questions about what exactly happened on September 6th and how we got there. What do we expect this commission to accomplish?
That's a good question, and a lot of those details are yet to be sorted out, but it does seem that some of the nuts and bolts of the decisions made ahead of time are likely to be parts of this. Look, commissions like this are rare, in part because we don't have violence like this in the United States that often, but also because they usually require bipartisan support. In this case, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the panel will be modeled on the commission formed after the 9/11 attacks back in 2001. That was a bipartisan group that investigated the circumstances leading up to those attacks. The recommendations from that panel led to, among other things, the creation of the Director of National Intelligence, which oversees all intelligence agencies. But one of the potential challenges with this commission is that, unlike the 9/11 attacks, the Capitol riot had partisan political motivations, and most members of Congress seem to have made up their minds about what led to it. But this also means that at least part of Washington will still be dealing with the fallout from the Capitol attacks and former President Donald Trump's role in them, as the current president, Joe Biden, tries pushing forward with his own agenda. At the top of that agenda, the pandemic and economic relief from it. He heads to Wisconsin tonight, his first official trip on Air Force One as president. First official trip west as president, to tout the American Rescue Plan that he's pushing through Congress. He's hoping to make a case to voters in a state that he narrowly won that they should be supporting this legislation and telling their lawmakers to do so. There, of course, remains big Republican criticism about the size and scope of the plan, Anne-Marie.
So let us talk about what the Biden administration would prefer that we talk about, what's on their agenda. You touched on some of that, of course, COVID relief. The Biden administration today announced an extension of foreclosures for homeowners to prevent evictions during the pandemic, among other things. What more do we know about this?
Yeah, so one of the first executive orders or actions taken by the new president back on January 20th was to extend this through the end of March. Now he's extending them through the end of June, and these are for federally backed mortgages. Roughly, I believe, 2 million or so people across the country have them. It's designed to continue to provide some at least temporary relief to those who are dealing with that. And it also provides up to 6 months of what they call additional mortgage payment forbearance, or just giving a pass on payments in 3-month increments for borrowers who entered forbearance on or before June 30th of last year. So again, these are modest moves made by the administration, the kinds of things they can do to provide relief to struggling Americans who have either lost their job or may have had to scale back amid the pandemic.
You touched on the fact that the president was heading west. This is, of course, coming as there are a handful of states that are looking to lift mask mandates. We're still in the middle of this pandemic. We're still struggling to get the vaccines into the arms of enough people to turn this thing around. What message is President Biden expected to bring to the American people?
Well, and in this case, Wisconsin has had a heck of a time trying to sort out whether or not they're going to have a mask mandate. The Democratic governor, the Republican legislature continue to go back and forth on this. He will, of course, do what he's done since he was a candidate and now as president, and that is promote wearing masks, social distancing, doing whatever Americans can to, help out their fellow neighbors and fellow Americans and protect themselves from this pandemic. But it is also expected that he's going to take some time to explain the details of his nearly $2 trillion American Rescue Plan. The House is still working on it, expected to put a little more of the details together this week so that the House can vote on it as early as next week. And then following that, it's supposed to head over to the Senate, where, among others, Republican senators, including Wisconsin's Ron Johnson, are strongly opposed to the legislation. Johnson is one of those who could decide to run for re-election in 2 years or hang it up and retire. And so sending the president to his home state to talk about this, that is partly by design, to go to states that he narrowly won to thank them, but also to put pressure on local Republicans who may be skeptical of his plan. Later in the week, he goes to Michigan to tour a Pfizer vaccine distribution facility, expected to talk there about the vaccination programs across the country and, of course, continue touting his pandemic relief bill.
We started off talking about this investigation into what happened on January 6th. The thing about President Biden is he's really tried to avoid making any comment on the impeachment trial. When he's asked directly, he gives answers, but they're pretty vague. Has this ultimately put him in a pretty good position because he can just sort of hit the ground running, just keep chugging along without any distractions about the impeachment or about what happened on January 6th?
Well, I don't know that he can completely chug along, because certainly it's going to affect the pace of the work he'd like to see Congress get done. By finishing up the trial over the weekend, the COVID relief debate can continue on schedule in the House and then later in the Senate. The goal is to have it all done by March 14th, when unemployment benefits expire, and it's looking like that's going to happen. If some kind of commission, however, gets underway and starts, trudging through all sorts of things that went on before and on January 6th, at some point they may have to come to the administration and ask for information, to talk to people who are still in government, and that inevitably bumps up against the White House to some extent and might require them to engage. But because he wasn't here officially, because he is not a senator who had to vote on this stuff, because he's the one sort of focused on the future, you're right, it allows him to separate himself a bit from it, stay above the fray, and sort of appear, at least to voters, to Americans across the country, that he's focused on the more urgent priority, of course, dealing with the pandemic. And it's going to be a challenge for Congress, too, because if that commission established by Congress starts to sort of suck up all the time and attention in this town, it could further, ruffle feathers and make things more difficult for Congress to get done.
Ed O'Keefe, great talking to you. Thank you.
Take care.